Hi, welcome to session 2. Again, we're looking at a key skill in this session, which is division. It is really important that we are super confident with our methods and that we're not just thrown off when the question looks too tricky for us to manage. So we will obviously get to that in a moment. We're going to do a very quick warm up. So we're not going to do a masses of multiplication questions, just the one. And then we can get stuck straight into bus shelter. Yes, there's no escaping it. Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to hit the pause button, have a go at that question and press play when you're ready. Okay, so you should have ignored the decimal and gone straight to your Chinese grid, and you would have hopefully seen that. Now, just to finish it off, what we've done there is 9 times 54, which is 486. Now, obviously, the question is different. The 9 is actually 0.9. So I've got a point in front of it. That's one place. So one place in on the answer as well. And we've got 48.6. So hopefully that went well. So we will obviously continue to practice that throughout the course with our warm-ups at the beginning. All right, let's get straight into our division. As I say, it's going to be bus shelter. There are other ways, and sometimes an alternative method can be more efficient. So I wouldn't say that it's the only thing that you should ever do when it comes to division, but it is really, really good. And it handles lots of questions better than some others do. So I would not be trying to avoid learning this. So if bus shelter has been a bit of a thing for you in the past, you just got to reset and say, right, this time it's not going to beat me. Okay, let's do our first question. So our first question is going to be 485 divided by 5. And I think we can be fairly confident because of our 5 times tables that we know this is going to fit into our bus shelter perfectly. So it's a really nice one for us to be able to start with. So we put 485 and look at how I've kind of spaced that out a little bit. When I remember, I don't always do it, but when I remember, I try and spread those numbers out a little bit so that if I've got some carrying over to do, then I've got some space to write in. Okay, I'm going to divide by 5. Now, the first thing for me to point out is that this 5, the number we're dividing by, can never travel into this space. It never goes into the bus shelter. See this as like a wall, a barrier that the 5 can never cross. So one of the mistakes that I often see is that 5 getting carried in. It's only an accident and it's very easy to do, but be aware of it so that you can try and avoid it wherever possible. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just work our way along this number, digit by digit, asking the question about how many 5s we can get into it. Okay, so let's do that. How many 5s can I get into 4? None. So I'm going to show that by putting a 0 up. But that means I haven't used any of the 4 yet. So I'm going to carry those 4 on to the next number. And I'm now not talking about how many 5s I can get into 8 because I've created 48. So I'm going to say, how many 5s can I get into 48? The answer to that is 9. 9 5s are 45. So that leaves me 3 to carry over. And I will now be working out how many 5s go into 35 because that's the number that I've now created. 5s into 35 goes 7 exactly. So 485 divided by 5 is 97. So that's the bus shelter. That's how we approach it and we work through it. Now, if I give you the next question, which is going to be virtually the same, 487 divided by 5. For this question, because our knowledge of the 5 times tables is good, we can see just by looking at it that that isn't going to go perfectly. There's no way that that's going to work. So our bus shuttle is going to have a little bit more to do. Let's have a look at it. So I'm not going to set it up any differently. I'm going to spread it out, divide that by the 5. 5s into 4 don't go, carry the 4. 5s into 48 go 9, remainder 3. 5s into 37 go 7. And then I've still got some remainder. And I'm going to write it as a little number, just like I've written all my remainders. I had a remainder 4, 3, and now I've got this 2. But there's nothing for the 2 to sit on. As soon as I get to this point, and I always call it like a digit that's floating around, I say, right, the 2's floating. As soon as I get to the point where I'm floating, then I need to add a 0. And when I add that very first 0, I also put a decimal point up in my answer. And then I carry on. 5s into 20. 5s into 20 go 4 exactly. And that is my final answer, 97.4. Now, I just want to explain, in case you're not sure, I just want to explain why we're putting a decimal point in and why it's okay to put zeros. So if we go back to the place value grid, which we used when we first were learning about numbers, we've got 100, tens, units, tenths, hundreds, and obviously they go on in either direction as well. If I put the number 487 in this grid, you will see that the 4 is under the hundreds for 400, the 8 is under the tens for 80, 7 is under the units for 7, and then the very next thing is a decimal point. All of our whole numbers, let's say I've got the number 16, it would live there in the grid, and it also has a decimal point on its end. All of our whole numbers have decimal points on the end of them. We just don't show them. Otherwise, we would end up with points absolutely all over the place. I would be doing things like 5 times 7 equals 35. Why would we do that? Well, we don't. But there is an invisible point that we sometimes forget is there. So that's why when we got to this stage here, we were able to put a point up, okay? So because there really is a decimal point in the question, we just couldn't see it. And then why is it okay to put zeros? Because I have zeros in the columns that have no value. They're placeholders, aren't they? So those zeros now start to appear because I need them. So when I'm at this stage, I'm not showing the point, although it really does exist. And I'm not showing the zeros, even though they really are there, because I don't know whether I'm going to need them or not. I just add them in as I require them. So that's kind of what's happening and why the decimal point is used when it's used and why it's okay to put those zeros in. Right, back to it. Let's do our next question. So we've got 163 and we're going to divide that by 4. And what I'd like you to do now is to start actually having a go with this. So I want you to pause, use your bus shelter and hit play when you're ready. Okay, so we've got 163. 4s into 1 don't go. So we're going to carry that. 4s into 16 will go 4 exactly. So that's 4. 4 4s are 16. Nothing to carry over, which means I've just got 3 here. 4s into 3 don't go. So up goes that 0. And I haven't used the 3 yet. So it gets written on the next digit, which is invisible. So my 3 is floating around. The minute that's floating, I put down the 0, I put down the point. Okay, that becomes my habit, that becomes my routine. 0 point every time. And now I can just keep going. So I've got 4s that I need to get into 30. So 4s into 30 go 7. 4 7s are 28. That leaves me 2. It's floating around, so I add a 0. 4s into 20 go 5 exactly. And there's my answer, 40.75. And if you got that right, really, really well done. Let's do another one. We're going to do 24.7, and we're going to divide that by 6. Okay. Now, you have to trust in your method. I want you to hit pause, and I want you to go for it. And then I want you to press play when you're ready. Okay, so this question is slightly different because the decimal point is already here. That's absolutely fine. I do have a problem if I have a decimal here. I don't divide by decimals. I always divide by whole numbers. But it is a whole number, so I don't need to worry about that question. I just need to proceed in the normal way. So let's do that. So I've got 24.7 this time to divide by 6. So 6s into 2 don't go, so carry the 2. I've not used those yet. 6s into 24 go 4 exactly. 6 4s are 24, so nothing to carry over. The next thing that I hit after I've done that 24 is a decimal. That tells me to get that decimal now in the answer. All right, so I'm going to put my point in, and then I move on to the 7. How many 6s can I get into 7? I can get 1. 1 times 6 is 6, so I have 1 left over. So that's floating around, add a 0. 6s into 10 will go 1 with 4 left over. So 1 times 6 is 6, 4 left over. Put down the 0. How many 6s go into 40? 6s into 40 go 6. 6 6s are 36, so that leaves me 4. 6s into 40 go 6. 6 6s are 36. That leaves me 4. And it's just going to keep going like that. So I've reached a point now where it is recurring and there's no point in carrying on. So I can write this 4.116, put a little dot over that 6, and it demonstrates that it's recurring. So quite a lot happening in that question. If you got it right, absolutely well done. And if you didn't, don't worry about it. At least you gave it a go. Not only did we have the decimal in the question, but we had this never-ending feel to the question on the end as well. So, like I say, if you did get that one right, good work. Let's do another one so that you are practicing this idea of having a decimal in the question. There you go. Hit pause and press play when you are ready. Okay, here we go. So 46.8, dividing that by 8. 8s into 4, don't go, carry the 4. Okay, 8s into 46. That is going to go 5 times. 8 5s are 40, leaving me 6 over, which will get written on the next digit. But it kind of had to hop over that decimal to get there. So I mustn't forget to put that decimal up in my answer. So 8s into 68 will go 8. 8 8s are 64. So that leaves me 4 over. And then 8s into 40 will go 5. So my final answer is 5.85 exactly. All right. Hopefully that went well. Now we're going to look at something a little trickier. Now, I know that we're whipping through this. You need to set your own goals when it comes to the division, okay? If you are new with bus shelter, then getting good at that is your first job. As we move on now, I'm kind of showing you the next level and the next level. So up to this point should be your goal. If you're feeling quite comfortable there already, then moving into these sections are really, really important, okay? And what you are building towards. So here it comes. We have got 32 divided by 0.3. All right, now I've already mentioned that having a decimal here in the question is fine, but we can't have it here. We don't divide by decimal. How many 0.3s can I get into 32? I'm really not about to start writing my 0.3 times tables out. So I'm going to manipulate the question, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that by just giving you a completely different thing to look at for a moment. If I had the question 1 divided by 2, I can rewrite that question as 1 divided by 2. 1 divided by 2 is a half. And I can see that number and I feel very comfortable with that number. That number is a half. I also know my rules of fractions allow me to write equivalent fractions. So if I was to times by 2, the top and the bottom of that fraction, I would end up with 2/4. And just to make absolutely sure there's no confusion, a half is that much of the shape. 2/4, this is it in quarters, 2/4 of the shape, 1/4, 2/4, exactly the same value. So if I was going to give you a half of my chocolate bar, or if I was going to give you 2/4 of my chocolate bar, I'd be giving you the same amount of food to eat. So I'm not giving you any more, I'm not giving you any less, they're equivalent. And I can use all of this to help me manipulate this. So the first thing that I would do is, instead of having the question written as a divide question, I would write it as a fraction, just so I can see what's happening. So I'm going to write 32 divided by 0.3. There it is, the denominator cannot be a decimal. So I'm going to use the fact that I can times the top and the bottom to change the numbers, but keep fractions that are true and equivalent. I'm going to use that to get rid of the decimal. If I now multiply the top and the bottom by 10, and I've specifically chosen 10 because it will shift that decimal point one place and basically get rid of it, I will get 320 on the top and 3 on the bottom. Timesing by 10 moves that one place in that direction and adds a 0 here. Once I've done that, so that extra step's crucial, but once I've done it, I'm now back just using a normal bus shelter to finish this off. So let's do that. We've got 320 that we want to divide by 3. So 3's into 3 go 1 exactly. 3's into 2, I can't get any, so the 2 is getting carried over. 3's into 20 go 6. 6 3's are 18. That's going to leave me 2. The 2 is floating around, so I add that 0, add that decimal. If a decimal was already in, obviously I wouldn't be adding a second one, but I add that decimal. Now 3's into 20 go 6. 3 6's are 18, leaving me 2. And hopefully you can already see that this pattern is going to continue and not break. You could do a couple more just to be sure, but we can already see that 20 came up here, it's come up here, and now it's coming up a third time. So that's enough for me to be happy that this is going to recur. And my final answer is 106.6 recurring. So manipulating to get rid of the decimal is the skill if you are faced with a question like that, which is not common on a non-calculator paper, which is why it can't be something to stress over. You need to be good at bus shelter. You will need to divide on a non-calculator paper. However, they're usually doable numbers, all right? Okay, what one are we going to do now? We'll do this one. So 48 divided by 0.4. All right. So Press pause and just see how far you get with that. Here we go. 48 over 0.4. I'm going to need to times by 10 to get rid of that. So I must make sure I do it to the top as well. That will give me 480 divided by 4. So let's pop it in. 4s into 4 go 1 exactly. 4s into 8 go 2 exactly. 4s into 0 don't go. So bring the 0 up. 120. That was actually a nice, simple one. See, I am nice sometimes. Okay. 92 divided by, let's do 0.4 again. 4 times tables. Okay, hit pause and press play when you're ready. Okay, so here comes the manipulation. You could, actually, I'm just going to show you, if you don't want to write it as a fraction, you don't have to. You could just write that you're going to times by 10 and do it that way. And then get going. So 4s into 9 go 2, remainder 1. 4s into 12 go 3. 4s into 0 are 0. Job's done. Nice and quickly. Okay. Now, some students want to divide the answer back down by 10 because we did the multiplying up by 10. It's really important that you don't do that. You don't need to, because what you have to remember is we are working with an equivalent question. So the values are the same. Remember, my half a chocolate and 2/4 of a chocolate means you've got the same thing. So even though we've rewritten the question, we've kind of got the same thing. So our answer holds true and we don't need to mess around with it at the end. So really don't ever do that. That's not necessary. Okay. Okay, we're going to do just one more, and then we're going to look at one last thing when it comes to division. Okay. So let's do 7.82 divided by 0.5. Hit pause, go for it, and press play when you're ready. Okay, now, like I said, these aren't particularly common on a non-calculator paper. So if you are managing these by hand, then there isn't anything on the non-calculator paper that's going to phase you. You can do this, you can do anything, okay? So I am going to times everything by 10, which is going to shift this decimal point 1 place in this direction to make the number bigger, okay? And then obviously it's also going to shift that completely out, which is the whole point of doing it. And we've got that. So now we're going to do 78.2. We're going to divide that by 5. 5s into 7 go 1, remainder 2. 5s into 28 to go 5, remainder 3. Now I've got that decimal point, so up it comes. 5s into 32 goes 6, remainder 2. That's floating around. So we're going to add the 0. No need to add the decimal because it's already there. And 5s into 20 go 4 exactly. So the answer to that is 15.64. Okay. Okay, so we are now going to look at doing 2-digit numbers. Now these are tricky. There is more than one way to do it. You can chunk up, but I want to do this because I want to show you a top tip, okay? It doesn't work for every question, but it's worth being aware of. If I had 4,068 and I divided that by 16, I could use my knowledge of fractions and rewrite this as the fraction that it is. And when I do that, it kind of enables my brain to accept that I can cancel this fraction. They're both even. If they're both even, it means I can half them. So if I divide the top and the bottom by 2, I would end up with this, which is an equivalent fraction. It's also reduced it into the 8 times table to enable me to just do the 8s. And I could literally put it in bus shelter and work it out from here. But I'm noticing that they're both even. So I'm thinking, well, I'll just do it again then. So if I divide by 2, I will get that. Now I'm working in my 4 times table. So I've taken something complicated, dividing by 16, and because of the question being even, I've been able to manipulate it into something that's smaller and more manageable. So I would then put that in the bus chart. I would finish it off. Another option when you are dividing by 2 digits is to just do some chunking. And by that, I mean, I've got 16. I'm going to times that by 10, which is 160. I can see that that is still a long way away from 4,068. So I would repeat, okay? So I could do 16 times 100. That's going to give me 1,600. I could then try 16 times 200. And that is going to give me double 16, 32 with my 2 zeros. I'm getting closer. I might work out my 5s, might work out my 50s, add them on. It's not a bad method. It's not ideal. It's if it doesn't go exactly, then it can sometimes be a bit confusing just towards the end. But chunking is another way of dealing with 2 digits. The only other way to do it, of course, is to just go straight into your bus shelter. So I've got 4068 that I'm going to put straight in with the 16. And then actually write some of the 16 times table. So 16, double it, 32, add those, and I've got 48, then I've got 64. And you'd keep going. 80 is the next one, and 96 is the next one. And I'd keep going with that. If I had to, I'd add more to it. If it was all I needed, then I've done enough. And then I can literally just go across and work it from there. So we'll finish it like this, because you might be so confident with your bus shelter that actually just writing a little bit of the 16 times table is the easiest option for you. So 16s into 4, obviously they don't go. 16s into 40, if I carry that 4 over, it's going to go 2. And then that's leaving me 8. Okay. 16s into 86, okay, that takes me to there with 6 left over. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, and I've got the 6 here left over. All right, the next one is 68. 16s into 68 will go 4. I can see that 4 16s are 64, so I've got 4 left over. So I'll put my 4 down. Obviously it's floating. So here I add my 0, add my point. And now I'm doing 16 into 40, which we've actually just done. That's 2 with 8 left over. Put down the 0. And then 16s into 80, go 5 exactly. So bus shelter is, for me, the most sensible thing to be doing and practicing and just getting confident in, because it's just going to do any question, any at all. And the only thing that you really, really have to remember is you can't divide by a decimal. So if you were to set it up and have something like that in the front, your alarm bell should ring and you know you're multiplying everything up. Okay? All right, well done. I have got a few questions for you to practice so that you can have a really good go at this before the next session. So they are there, and it seems sensible to just check your answers on a calculator when you're ready. Okay, so that's it. And I will see you for the next session when you are ready. Well done today.